What should I spray paint on this wall? Okie bird. It's beautiful, concise, descriptive, and easy to remember. You still talk to Vox? You don't? I fucking hate that guy. I mean, maybe it will. If you get thrown into the pit of some black company, math tests and high school bullies will seem like a dream come true when you're looking down at a suicide net while eating a calorie mate on your unpaid lunch break. I'm a fan of VTubers. I don't obsess over specific groups of VTubers, just various ones big and small. So when I got an email from a developer asking to read their Nijisanji VN, I was kind of curious since I knew nothing about Nijisanji until recently. As you may have heard, the English branch of Nijisanji, along with the company Anycolor itself, has come under fire due to the various mishandlings of the termination of their talent Celine Tatsuki. And I'm not gonna go into that, okay? Because there are plenty of videos on the topic. But since the situation is imploding on itself, I thought it would be best to look at this visual novel before it's too late. Note that this is of course a fan project and has nothing to do with Nijisanji itself. If you fundamentally disagree with any sort of continued support for the talents, of which this visual novel features both old and current ones, then I understand. However, for previous fans who might want some closure and to experience one last story featuring the talents that they previously enjoyed, I'd stick around because today I'm going to be talking about Ninisanni, a visual novel featuring the Nijisanji English branch and why it might be worth giving it a try. My name is BruceGoneLoose, but please call me Bruce, as we explore the visual novel known as Ninisanni. The story begins with the protagonist starting his second year of high school, extremely depressed after breaking up with his supermodel girlfriend, Alira Pandora. I had an initial immediate disconnect with this visual novel because in the protagonist's flashbacks with Alira, she speaks in completely unintelligible Zoomer speak. But the punchline ends up being that the protagonist broke up with her because he couldn't understand said Zoomer speak, so I thought that was funny and relatable, so it reeled me back in. Now depressed and alone due to these circumstances, the protagonist sulks about until he is reached out by Palmu Rainpuff, his alleged fairy godmother that proclaims that she'll help him find love and, more importantly, get laid. There isn't much more to say about the initial premise, it's simple and to the point. The common route of Ninisanni involves the protagonist going to school and interacting with the various girls either at school or in other precarious spots. That's pretty much it. There's no overarching plot besides find love and get laid. There are a lot of choices as you meet each character, learn their personalities, try to get into their DMs, and see their various interactions with each other. But there is not much substance to the common route beyond that. I'm not really one for too much drama, but having some sort of common route plot would have been nice. Many visual novels include this introduction, getting to know the characters sequence, and it's usually followed by some sort of plot, or at least minor conflict between sets of characters, exploring their different boundaries that slightly deepens their characterization, setting up for their individual routes. Maybe I'm looking too much into a visual novel with its main goal being to lay Nijisanji Vtubers, but I wanted to mention it because in some ways Ninisanni reminds me of Kadowa Shoujo. You know, if you used it with Honey Pop and made it about VTubers. I'll talk a bit about the characters before I dive into their routes or this game's concept of a route in general, but again, please note that I have no idea about the actual VTuber personalities that this game represents, so I'm just going to be going off of the characterization in this visual novel. The visual novel features every talent from Nijisanji's Lazulite, Obsidia, and Etheria generations. In short, there are a lot of characters. Starting from the top, we got Finana Ryugu, the protagonist's non-blood related sister, as he makes sure to remind us at every single chance he gets, who is a neat mermaid. She calls her brother Oni-chan. Absolute win. But yeah, just a neat. Her interactions with other characters are minimal. Alira Pandora is the Zoomer Speaks supermodel, Heavenly Sky Dragon, who is playful but chill. She doesn't go to the same school as the protagonist, so you don't see her very often, but since she never wanted to end the relationship in the first place, it's not hard to get into her route. Celine Tatsuki is the boisterous Moon Sky Dragon, who laughs all the time and jokes around with the protagonist, especially when she finds him with other girls. Though she dislikes lewd jokes, she also really likes guns. Pamu Rainpuff is the aforementioned love fairy godmother who is mischievous and lewd-minded. Her love advice is sometimes decent, but she mostly floats around the protagonist and hounds him about his lack of game. Rosemi Lovelock is the Ojo-sama of the bunch, who has her own fan club that she calls Buddhas. Pigs, it means pigs in Japanese. She has her innocent and adorable moments, however. Petra Gruin is the weeb of this universe. She meets the protagonist whilst playing an otome game in class, and is also found to be part of the anime club. She also plays the piano, and whilst she seems chill, she dislikes the protagonist initially for being a Chad. Reimu Endo is a ghost member of the disciplinary committee, and I literally mean she's a ghost member of the disciplinary committee who initially comes off as a positive character who is a bit of a stickler for the rules. However, after hanging out with her, the protagonist finds out she has a bit of a feisty and playful side beyond that. Enna Alouette is a blunt and foul-mouthed bird whom the protagonist often refers to as a gremlin. Beyond that, she likes violence and pranks, including literally kidnapping the protagonist on their first encounter. Not the best way to meet your future lover, but probably not the worst. Millie Parfait has a weird personality, and to be honest, I'm not really sure how to explain it. Most of the events in the visual novel involving her are instigated by her whimsical nature. Otherwise, it is said that she works a lot and she simps for Alira. Nina Kosaka is the protagonist's childhood best friend and the school nurse. She comes off as cool and caring in some ways, but also lame in others, due to her being a decent amount older than the protagonist. But she's a fox, so that's incredibly based. I finished the common route in about 3 hours, and finished the entire visual novel in about 6 hours total. Therefore, math dictates that I finished the 10 heroine routes in around 3 hours. Whoa, Scoob. As you could imagine, the routes are predictably short. In truth, it's hard to strictly call them routes with the length they are, because they are formulated of essentially 2 different scenes, a date and an epilogue. The summary is this. After the common route, you can choose how to spend your weekend depending on the affection levels you've gained with each of the 9 main heroines, with Pamu being the default if you fail to romance any other girl. From there, you get one scene where a date of sort occurs, whether you're out shooting with Celine, drinking with Nina, or jacuzziing with your non-blood related sister Finana, which always ends in an erotic scene. We'll talk about the erotic scenes in a minute. After this, you get an epilogue with said heroine some amount of time in the future, which is extremely brief and also ends in an erotic scene. I wouldn't call these routes bad, but they're sort of anticlimactic with how short they are. Mind you, this is sort of an inevitability when you include so many different heroines in your visual novel. Ninisanni's routes aren't bad, but I wouldn't call them satisfying either, unfortunately. I mentioned that Ninisanni feels like Katawa Shoujo and Honey Pop combined, and I think that's an accurate description. It nails the mood at some points to feel like Katawa Shoujo, especially in looks, only for Pamu and the protagonist to start using lewd language and strategizing on getting the protagonist laid, reminding you of Honey Pop in how it's written. One thing I found is that the characters often felt similar in how they were written. Some fall into tropes that make them unique, but others felt indistinguishable from each other. After reading the Nijisanji wiki, I can see the traits the developer wanted to convey in the characters, but in my opinion they should have been a bit more accentuated. Beyond that, it's worth mentioning that this visual novel contains a decent amount of Zoomer speak, off-color jokes, and very colorful language, literally mentioned by the developer himself. The writing style will not appeal to some people, probably many typical visual novel fans if I'm being honest here, and might even offend, but I didn't think it was all that bad. At the very least, Ninisanni kept me interested and reading for over 4 hours straight, despite being an amateur visual novel project about a VTuber group I know nothing about. So I think that deserves some merit. The visuals in Ninisanni are not incredible. The UI stands out as being well made and incorporates a style that makes me feel like I'm reading a visual novel from 10 years ago. Some of the UI is confusing. I couldn't figure out how to get out of the extra screen, for example. The backgrounds are real life images, not much to say there. There are no CGs as you might expect, which is unfortunate because I would have loved seeing one of Finana getting spanked. And the sprites are exactly as you see. They are stills taken from the characters' respective VTuber models and run over with a few filters. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of variation in sprites because of this. Some characters lack the sprites needed to convey the emotion of what they are saying. I am sure Ninisanni's creator worked with what they could given the limited circumstances, but seeing the same sprites over and over can be a bit boring. That being said, they make use of motion quite often, moving the sprites around in accordance with the dialogue, which helps keeps things interesting. Ninisanni's erotic scenes contain very colorful language as you might expect, but that's the bulk of it. Given there are no CGs, it's hard to make an immersive erotic scene. Again, sprite motion is used to attempt to simulate what is supposed to be happening, but that can only bring you so far. I question the inclusion of these scenes in general. I don't know the talents nor Nijisanji's outlook on erotic content being made for their characters, but at least to me it seems sort of sus to include it. That being said, this is likely the only visual novel ever made where the protagonist dies, has ghost sex with a heroine during his funeral, and then comes back to life. So consider the positives and the negatives. There isn't much else to say. Ninisanni is a Renpai visual novel. The developer took most of the assets without consent and openly admits it, saying, and I quote, "Ocean law, baby. Free men don't ask for permission." I respect the hustle, at least. Whilst most of this video has been focused on critiquing Ninisanni, I think it has its merits as a fan project. Of the English visual novels I've read, it's on the better side of the spectrum. It has a sort of raw earnestness to it. It's like the visual novel equivalent of someone burning their mixtape to CDs and handing it out to their friends. It's a bit scuffed, but you can feel the passion behind it. Sure, it's not winning any awards in its presentation, but it might be worth reading if you're a fan of Nijisanji. Even I, who is not a fan of Nijisanji, read this visual novel that, in turn, made me want to check them out. I'm not going to because it's pretty clear at this point that any color chose black as their true color, but it's the thought that counts. I appreciate the developer reaching out to me, and I appreciate you for watching this video. That'll be all. Let me know in the comments what you think from what you've seen for this visual novel, or maybe another fan project or visual novel you'd like me to cover. See you later.